Time now for the lead panel is back. Susan Page, Jason Johnson, Matthew Continetti. I want to get into 2020 here a minute, but very quickly, anybody here think that the president can successfully stop Bob Mueller's report from going public, Susan?
No.
Yeah.
You know, it's like water in your house. You know, it always gets through one way or another. And Bob Mueller is an experienced guy in Washington. This report is going to come out.
Yeah, I think if there's one lesson of the past several years, Donald Trump has had great difficulty preventing people from telling their stories. I mean, it's a long list of people
and in some ways
he has not been able to stop. So
it's only weak. He only looks weaker if he tries and fails.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They could lock it away. They could put it in the basement like TPP. They could say you can only take out small pieces. People are going to find a way to share the information that they have. You can't stop it.
Bernie Sanders. This seems to, I mean, if you were to create the worst possible 3-week period for his presidential campaign, it would be the launch of the person you share the most ideological space with, Elizabeth Warren, and the fact you've had to defend yourself against the perception that your supporters are very anti-woman.
He's done. And I was
really?
Yeah,
you think he's done?
I think
wow.
He's done. I was literally having this discussion with a good contact of mine who's on the campaign. I was like, I see Bernie Sanders launching his campaign and by August realizing he won't be in the top 5 in Iowa and dropping out. I don't think he'll get that far.
Let me put up the Daily Kos. They did their straw poll, and this was their very first one this time. 4 years ago, I believe in the very first one, he hit 69%. Okay, he is now in 5th place. Elizabeth Warren at the top, 22. Not surprising, she just got in. Beto at 15, Harris 14, Biden 14. Sanders in 5th, Susan. This is his people, Daily Kos. This is what these are supposed to be his sweet spot.
Different era. You know, the Me Too movement made a difference. The rise of women and more diverse candidates in 2018 made a difference in the expectations of Democrats. And by the way, it's different running in a 24-person field than in a 3-person field, which is what he had last time.
It's hard to be new twice, isn't it?
Bernie Sanders had one great advantage in 2016, which is he was running against Hillary Clinton. And it was the same advantage that Donald Trump had. Now, as Susan says, larger field, still actually some support among Democrats in some polls for someone new, even in addition to all the various candidates that have already put their name forward. So Bernie seems to be an old story.
But I don't buy the idea that he drops out. Bernie seems a pretty determined guy.
He's got a tremendous amount of arrogance. Yeah. Our revolution is going to be on the ground in Iowa, right? Yeah. They're ready. They're 2,000 people strong. The issue that I think he's going to run into, though, is people forget how much Democrats still blame him. There are Democrats that blame him for having President Trump. They think he didn't work enough for Hillary Clinton. You hear those stories all the time, and I think that's going to harm him. And people they don't want to see the past at all. They don't want Biden. They don't want Hillary. They don't want Bernie.
And in some ways, Bernie, you're right, is associated with the past. On that front. Steve King, I bring this up today because it seems as if you have, at least by a portion of the Republican Party, that is trying to get rid of this wart. Excise it, right? You had people are coming out trying to get rid of him. You have a real candidate challenging him early in a primary. And yet, why do I have a feeling that suddenly they're going to regret raising their expectations that they can defeat him?
Well, you're not going to defeat him if you don't challenge him, right? So you might as well go that way. Liz Cheney out there,
she went out
criticizing him. Now a member of the leadership, saying these are not the values that represent the GOP.
Do you realize that the targeting of Steve King late in that campaign, Matthew, I talked to some strategists out there in Iowa who said it actually, because there's sort of this was rally around Steve King moment, it actually saved the Republican governor's race, the Republican in the governor's race.
And that same Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, is now declining to endorse Steve King. So I do think you see the Republican establishment, both on Capitol Hill and in Iowa, beginning to say it's time for him to go. And that's why you have a new, strong primary challenge against him.
And what happens when Donald Trump refuses to say anything about Steve King in either way? When Steve King, and the wink and the nod is, he's not against Steve King.
Yeah, well, look, the president doesn't disagree with things that Steve King is saying. And I think the real challenge that the Republican Party has is you don't want Steve King to be your Ocasio-Cortez, right? There are other things that the Republican Party wants to talk about heading into 2020, other things they want to talk about this year. They don't want Steve King to become the face of the party. Donald Trump is bad enough, but you don't want that sort of additional problem. And really, you know, his flirting with white nationalism, his comments, they're not only dangerous to sort of American public discourse, but they're an insult to the large number of Republicans who don't feel that way.
By the way, just dawned on me, we didn't say what he said. His actual quote: white nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive? And then Susan, he sort of pushed back, implied that the Times was trying to make him look bad, but he never denied the quote and just simply said, well, I'm a nationalist. And he's trying to say, you know, just don't pay attention to the word white.
You don't need to make Steve King look bad, because not just on this occasion, he has said things that are so clearly offensive.
Well, it does look like the party as a whole is trying to do it. We'll see if President Trump participates. Susan, Jason, Matthew, thank you very much. Up ahead, when